It's 95%. According to MIT data, that is actually the failure rate of generative AI pilots inside corporations right now.
Wow. Yeah, it's a massive number.
Right. We constantly hear that, artificial intelligence is this unstoppable force reshaping the global economy. Yet, behind the walls of the world's biggest companies, the deployment is basically stalling.
And the twist here is the underlying cause, really. These pilots are not failing because the technology is inadequate or, the software is broken.
No, not at all.
They are failing because employees are actively and intentionally sabotaging them.
Exactly. So welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to dissect this eye-opening April 2026 press release from EON AI Ventures alongside some really fascinating data from MIT and Workplace Intelligence.
Right.
We are going to explore this hidden workplace crisis, examine the psychological divide that's tearing company cultures apart, and, break down the mechanics of the radical new platform a Singapore-based venture builder has designed to solve it.
Yeah, and the scale of the resistance really reframes how we think about technological adoption. I mean, historically, we assume that when a highly efficient tool is introduced to a workforce, adoption is, merely a matter of time and basic training.
Right, like just send out a memo and people will use it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the data cited in this release paints a picture of a structural crisis. The MIT Future Tech study and the Workplace Intelligence report reveal that 29% of employees admit to actively sabotaging their company's AI rollouts.
Almost a third of the workforce. That is wild.
It is. And this is not passive reluctance. This is not someone forgetting their login credentials or putting off a training module. This is deliberate interference.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's look at the mechanics of that sabotage because it takes several forms, some of which are frankly actively dangerous to the enterprise.
Yeah, definitely.
The reports document workers entering highly sensitive proprietary company data into public, unapproved AI tools just to prove the internal systems are restrictive or, unnecessary.
Which is a huge security risk.
Massive. And you have employees flat out refusing to log into the approved enterprise platforms. And perhaps most surprisingly, there is a documented trend of workers intentionally generating low-quality, error-ridden output and presenting it to management to make the AI look useless.
Wow. So they're weaponizing it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They are deliberately weaponizing the hallucinations of the model to build a case against its implementation. It's kind of like being handed a teleportation device by your boss, right? But you go and bury it in your backyard because you're terrified of offending the local taxi drivers.
That is a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Which forces us to ask, why would someone intentionally break a tool designed to make their job easier?
Right. What's the psychology there?
Well, Dan Lajerskar, the founder of EON AI Ventures, argues in the release that this is fundamentally a human capability crisis, not a software problem.
Okay.
The gap between what these hyper-advanced models can do and what the average human worker understands how to do is creating this paralyzing anxiety. Software alone cannot bridge a human learning gap.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, when workers look at an enterprise AI platform, they do not see a helpful digital assistant. They see a highly competent, low-cost replacement.
Yeah, and if you are listening to this at your desk right now, ask yourself, when your company announced their AI strategy, did you feel empowered, or did you quietly wonder if your specific role was being audited for redundancy?
Exactly. That anxiety maps perfectly onto the demographic data, which, by the way, contains the biggest shocker of this entire research stack.
Right, because you might assume that older workers, those heavily entrenched in legacy systems and closer to retirement,
Yeah,
would be the primary source of this resistance.
that's what you would think. But in reality, 44% of Gen Z workers are actively sabotaging these AI rollouts.
For 44%.
Yeah, that is the highest rate of any demographic cohort surveyed.
That statistic just seems completely counterintuitive on the surface. We are talking about digital natives here. This is a generation that grew up entirely immersed in digital ecosystems and mobile computing.
Right. But if you analyze their specific position within the corporate hierarchy, the sabotage becomes a highly rational, albeit destructive defense mechanism.
How so?
Well, Gen Z workers primarily occupy entry-level roles. They are responsible for the foundational knowledge work of the enterprise. Drafting communications, summarizing lengthy reports, writing basic boilerplate code, conducting initial research.
Which happens to be the exact tier of cognitive labor that generative AI is uniquely exceptional at automating right now.
Precisely. If you are a 24-year-old analyst, summarizing reports is how you learn the business. It is the stepping stone.
Right.
So if management introduces an AI that instantly summarizes those reports, it threatens to eliminate the bottom rung of the corporate ladder entirely. Gen Z is the generation most exposed to immediate, tangible job elimination.
So they're basically trying to prove the AI is unreliable to ensure their human roles remain structurally necessary to the company.
Exactly. But the executive response, detailed in the data, indicates that management is entirely unwilling to tolerate that defense mechanism. Organizations are taking an incredibly hard line.
Yeah, they are not messing around. 69% of executives are planning AI-related layoffs, specifically targeting employees who refuse to become proficient.
That is a huge number.
It is. And
Really.
furthermore, 77% state they will permanently freeze non-adopters out of any future promotions or leadership tracks. The corporate landscape is just dividing with unprecedented speed.
And, executives are taking that hard line because the financial delta between the saboteurs and the adopters is just too massive to ignore.
Right, let's talk about the super users.
Yeah, the data highlights this group categorized as super users. These are the employees who have integrated AI deeply into their workflows. They're saving an average of nearly 9 hours a week.
That is more than an entire standard workday recovered every single week.
Exactly. Which is 4.5 times more time saved than the AI laggards.
Wow. And if you scale that across a department, the math is staggering. A team of 50 super users is recovering 450 hours of productivity per week.
Yeah, you can launch new products, optimize systems, or completely outmaneuver a competing team that is still, manually grinding through that foundational work.
And predictably, because of that massive output disparity, those super users are 3 times more likely to receive promotions and substantial pay raises.
Which creates a completely unsustainable internal dynamic.
Right.
Inside the exact same company, you have one cohort actively trying to break the machine out of a fear of obsolescence, and another cohort leveraging that exact same machine to compound their own value and rapidly climb the corporate ladder.
Yeah.
The traditional approach to enterprise software deployment, purchasing a company-wide license, sending a blanket mandate email from IT, and expecting organic adoption is exactly what generates that 95% failure rate. The blanket mandate is what triggers the sabotage.
Right. So if a blanket mandate triggers active sabotage, management is forced to do something kind of counterintuitive. Stop forcing the software on people indiscriminately and start diagnosing the underlying fear and capability gaps.
Exactly.
That is the pivot EON AI Ventures is making. They realized the one-size-fits-all rollout had to be abandoned entirely. Their response, as detailed in the release, begins with a platform component called EON AI Fluency.
Right, and they have constructed this massive curriculum of 100 specialized courses divided into 5 distinct capability groups, scaling from Group A to Group E.
Okay, so how does this actually mitigate the sabotage epidemic?
Well, to understand that, we have to look at the mechanics of the assessment phase.
Yeah.
Group A represents baseline awareness, understanding fundamental concepts like context windows and basic prompting.
Super basic stuff.
Right. And then Group E scales all the way up to complex agent architecture,
Yeah.
where a worker is actually designing autonomous AI systems that interact with one another to execute multi-step workflows.
So a massive spectrum.
Exactly. If you force a beginner into Group E, you trigger panic. If you force an advanced developer to sit through Group A, you breed resentment.
To solve that, EON developed what they call the EAFI assessment. It's a diagnostic tool that maps a user's current cognitive baseline and technical capability before they ever touch the training modules.
Right. It diagnoses exactly where the learner sits on that spectrum and prescribes a highly specific, personalized entry point. The press release describes this as a pathway designed to convert fear into fluency.
I love that phrase, converting fear into fluency.
Yeah, and the psychological mechanism at play here is crucial. By eliminating the overwhelming pressure of a company-wide mandate and replacing it with a personalized incremental diagnostic, the platform shifts the worker's perspective entirely.
The AI stops presenting itself as a monolithic replacement.
Exactly. It begins to look like a manageable tool for personal career advancement. You meet the user exactly where they are, giving them a discrete, achievable next step rather than an existential threat.
Okay, I understand the theory behind the personalized pathway, but let's pause on that mechanism for a second because we really have to address the reality of corporate behavior.
Fair enough.
If a worker's underlying motivation is still fear-like, if they know that 69% of executives are planning layoffs for non-adopters, a personalized training portal doesn't just magically cure human nature.
That's true.
We all know how online corporate training usually works, right? Employees load up the modules, Mute the audio in a background tab, click Next every 3 minutes while doing other work, and eventually just guess their way through a multiple choice quiz to get a PDF certificate.
Oh, absolutely.
So, if people are willing to feed bad data into an AI just to save their jobs, what is stopping them from mindlessly clicking through these 100 courses to fake their fluency?
That specific vulnerability right there is exactly why traditional online learning and multiple choice certificates are becoming essentially worthless in the AI era.
Right.
I mean, if an employee can use a second browser window with ChatGPT to instantly solve any multiple choice assessment, the credential proves absolutely nothing to an executive.
Nothing at all.
Management is demanding absolute verification of skills, which brings us to the second and arguably most radical component of the EON platform, the tribunal.
The tribunal. Here's where it gets really interesting. It sounds incredibly intense, and based on the mechanics outlined in the release, it is explicitly designed to be an uncheatable credentialing process.
Yes, this is not a web browser quiz.
Not at all. EON has moved the final verification step entirely out of traditional 2D interfaces and into an immersive XR or extended reality environment.
Right, and we should clarify what that environment practically entails.
Hmm.
Extended reality in this context means the learner is either wearing a spatial computing headset or operating in a highly monitored immersive spatial interface.
Okay.
You are removed from your standard desktop environment. And EON has engineered 3 distinct, highly advanced AI avatars to serve as the examiners.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the Economist, the Psychologist, and the Pragmatist. The learner is subjected to a real-time gauntlet where they must defend their applied knowledge against all 3 simultaneously.
I mean, think about the pressure of that dynamic. It is akin to defending a complex PhD thesis, but instead of a panel of human professors who might be, skimming your documentation and half asleep, you're being interrogated in a virtual pressure cooker by 3 multidisciplinary AI superbrains designed specifically to find the flaws in your logic.
It's intense.
The pragmatist might attack the technical architecture of your proposed AI solution. The economist immediately challenges you on the financial ROI and the resource allocation. And while you are answering them, the psychologist pushes you on user adoption metrics and the human impact of the rollout.
What's fascinating here is the anti-cheat mechanics built into this environment. Because it is an immersive spatial environment, there is no text field to type into. There is no clipboard access to copy and paste pre-written response. And there is absolutely no secondary window or hidden tab to discreetly ask an external AI model for the answer. Your hands are essentially empty.
You're totally exposed.
You must process the simultaneous critique from the avatars and deliver a coherent, spoken defense of your reasoning on the spot in milliseconds.
So it is a pure test of real-time cognitive synthesis. You cannot pass it by proxy. You cannot pay someone on the internet to log in and take it for you. And you certainly cannot buy the credential.
Exactly. This represents a massive shift in how we value human capital. EON N realized that in an era where AI can generate perfect code, write flawless essays, and pass standard exams, the only remaining way to prove human mastery is to successfully defend your logic against an AI designed to deconstruct it.
That makes total sense.
It isolates your ability to think, adapt, and synthesize under pressure. In the rapidly approaching future job market, possessing a purely uncheatable, verified record of real-time reasoning is going to become the ultimate currency.
Okay, so what does this all mean? We have outlined a corporate landscape paralyzed by sabotage, an adaptive fluency curriculum to rebuild trust, and a rigorous XR tribunal to mathematically verify that the capability is real.
Right.
But this raises a fundamental economic question. If mastering this platform is the prerequisite to surviving the AI revolution and avoiding executive layoffs, how does the average global worker actually gain access to it?
That's the million-dollar question.
Because the traditional credentialing models we have today structurally exclude massive portions of the global workforce, particularly in the global south, simply because of the prohibitive upfront capital required for training.
Exactly. This raises an important question because the barrier to entry is the defining bottleneck of the global tech economy.
Yeah.
If you require workers to pay thousands of dollars up front for a cutting-edge technical education, you're artificially restricting the talent pool to wealthy tech hubs. EON addresses this directly through a financing model they call impact share, which fundamentally rewrites the risk dynamics of technological education.
Okay, how does that work?
Under this structure, the learner or the institution only pays 1% of the program cost upfront.
1% upfront. The mechanics of sustaining a global business on a 1% initial capture are fascinating. I mean, it's kind of like going to a restaurant that only makes you pay the full bill if you can prove the meal actually made you healthier a month later.
That's actually a brilliant analogy. It means EON is essentially operating as a venture capital firm, but instead of investing in software startups, they are investing in human capability.
Right.
That is the exact mechanism. It is closely related to an income share agreement, but deeply aligned with outcome-based venture building. EON only earns the remaining revenue when the learner or the deploying institution achieves a mathematically measurable outcome in the real world.
Wow. So they take on the risk.
Exactly. If the platform fails to convert a worker's fear into fluency, or if that worker fails to secure a tangible market premium based on their new skills, EON absorbs the financial loss. They are betting entirely on the verifiable success of their own infrastructure.
It requires absolute confidence in the tribunal's ability to produce market-ready talent. And to ensure those outcomes actually materialize and trigger the financial return, EON integrated two final ecosystem components.
Right. Career Compass and the EON Marketplace.
Right. Once a user survives the XR gauntlet and secures the credential, Career Compass takes that verified data and maps it against live global job market metrics.
It connects the capability to the capital. It does not just issue a congratulations message. It dynamically shows the learner the exact salary premiums their verified skills currently command.
That's incredible.
And it points them toward specific open roles that require that precise level of AI fluency.
And then the EON Marketplace serves as the functional bridge. It links these newly verified learners directly to EON's existing network of over 4,400 institutional customers worldwide.
Which brings up a critical piece of context regarding EON's operational history. When you string together immersive XR environments, simultaneous AI avatars, and outcome-aligned venture financing, it can sound remarkably like a speculative pitch deck from a startup founded 3 weeks ago.
Oh, yeah, it sounds very sci-fi.
Right. However, EON AI Ventures is operating atop the 25-year track record of EON reality. They are not theorizing about spatial computing or global deployment. They have an established baseline of 136 million platform downloads across more than 80 countries.
That is massive scale.
They have spent decades building complex digital learning environments for governments, military organizations, healthcare systems, and global enterprises.
Yeah, and the leadership team in Singapore includes a quote in the press release that distills the entire philosophy behind this massive initiative. They state that in a corporate environment where nearly a third of workers are actively sabotaging rollouts out of an existential fear of obsolescence, the institutions that will dominate the next decade are the ones that fundamentally restructure their approach.
Absolutely.
The winners will be the organizations that invest heavily in human capability infrastructure, rather than those that simply purchase enterprise software licenses and expect organic miracles.
It highlights the reality that technology itself is no longer the ultimate differentiator. I mean, every Fortune 500 company can buy access to the exact same foundational AI models.
Right. They all have the same API keys.
Exactly. They all have the same baseline intelligence available. Therefore, the only remaining competitive advantage a company can possess is the sophisticated human infrastructure required to guide, implement, and leverage that intelligence effectively. If your workforce is terrified of the tool is useless.
Well said. Let's synthesize the journey we've taken through this data today. We began with a highly counterintuitive premise. Massive AI pilots are stalling not due to technical failure, but because employees, led unexpectedly by Gen Z, are actively sabotaging the platforms to protect their foundational knowledge roles.
Right. And we then explored how management's threat of layoffs necessitates a solution beyond blanket mandates, leading to EON's EOFI diagnostic. By personalizing the learning pathway from basic awareness to complex agent architecture, the system is designed to dismantle fear through achievable incremental milestones.
From there, we broke down the mechanics of the ultimate verification tool, the Tribunal. An intense, uncheatable, extended reality environment where learners must verbally defend their reasoning against the simultaneous scrutiny of the Economist, the Psychologist, and the Pragmatist.
And finally, we analyzed the economics required to scale this globally. The impact share model dismantles the traditional barriers to entry by requiring only 1% upfront, aligning EON's financial success entirely with the measurable career outcomes of the learners, all facilitated by the Career Compass and Marketplace ecosystem.
It is a rigorous, holistic approach to a crisis most companies are still pretending doesn't exist. But before we conclude, there's an underlying phrase in this press release that demands a bit more scrutiny. EON repeatedly mentions preparing the workforce for the agent economy.
Yeah, that concept carries profound implications for the future of corporate structure. I mean, we have spent this time analyzing the tribunal as an educational mechanism, an uncheatable credentialing process to prove you have mastered the material and avoid being swept up in the 69% of planned layoffs.
Right.
But consider the logical, long-term progression of an infallible assessment tool.
If you have an XR environment capable of instantly analyzing a human's logic, tone, adaptability, and synthesis under extreme pressure.
Exactly. If EON's uncheatable AI tribunal becomes the recognized gold standard for verifying human cognitive capability across the globe, what happens to the traditional human job interview?
Oh, wow.
Human-led interviews are notoriously flawed. They are subject to immense personal bias, candidates routinely exaggerate their capabilities on resumes, and human hiring managers are constrained by fatigue, mood, and, subjective judgments.
That is a staggering paradigm shift. If a global enterprise knows that a multidisciplinary panel of highly advanced AI avatars has already interrogated you in a high-stress, real-time spatial environment and mathematically certify that your reasoning skills and technical execution are in the top tier, a human hiring manager's subjective opinion becomes entirely redundant.
Completely.
The AI has already conducted a far more rigorous, objective, and comprehensive assessment of your neural processing than any HR department ever could.
We spend a tremendous amount of time debating which tasks AI will automate next. We worry about coding, writing, and analysis. But the logical conclusion of an uncheatable AI assessment platform is that one of the very first white-collar functions to be fully replaced might be the hiring manager themselves.
Think about the reality of that for a moment. The next time you are pursuing a critical career transition, you might not be attempting to charm a distracted executive across a conference table. You might be stepping into an immersive spatial environment to face the quiet, simultaneous scrutiny of the avatars. It forces a rather uncomfortable question. If you had to strip away your notes, close your browser tabs, and log into the tribunal right now, how would your reasoning hold up under the pressure?